Hey guys, welcome back to Altaz-Review, where we talk about the latest games, the oldest games, and everything in between. We've reached a point where most games are attempting to innovate ideas in old IPs and expand on systems we've seen in old games. A great game that changed the way we see existing ideas was a horror game called SOMA. Seeing the title, I expected it to be a redundant title that uses cyber horror or horrid monsters in a dark, destroyed environment. But I was surprised by the tactics and ideas used in this game and how effective they were for the genre. So let's talk more about what it did so different. Spoiler warning for any story elements because the story is the most important part. SOMA begins with a pretty simple setup. You, Simon Jarrett, just woke up, you have a headache, and your environment has little notes and objects that inform you, the player, about your situation. You can interact with pretty much everything: cups, drawers, doors, buttons, anything that's not pinned down. But there's some kind of information to be learned from everything. Your own bedroom helps you understand this fact early on. You look around, reading little notes and emails, while the little objects strewn around help you understand what kind of person your character is and what kind of people he interacts with. The first hour of gameplay has you going to the doctor to get your brain scanned. Apparently, your headache is due to a recent car accident, and you need to get a quick checkup with some special technology. But right after you start the scan, you wake up to find that the doctor's office has turned into some high-tech lab. It's a pretty simple horror setup, where you're confused and you don't know where you are and you don't know how you got here. But the interesting thing is how confusing it is to continue. The suspense stems mostly from the environment, a seemingly dystopian underwater cyber world. But you have time to explore and see all the information in a room before any threats show up. The game kind of alternates between teaching you about what to look out for and seeing some new cyber horror. And the horror is more in the tension than in looks or jump scares, which is well appreciated in a horror game. You're more tense about what might be lurking around the corner. You run into a few strange machines that seem to be aware of their surroundings, and they lead you to some even stranger moral decisions and questions which you carry with you throughout the story. Eventually, you find the only other sentient existence in the game that actually thinks clearly, Catherine. But she's also seemingly an AI who believes herself to be human. The amazing twist for this game, however, is that after getting through a bunch of risky, life-threatening situations, Catherine is confused at your comments about how you're the last human for miles and you're confused about the situation and you just want to get out of there. But she tells you to look in a mirror and see yourself for once, where you find out you yourself are a cyber machine, with essentially an AI that has your original memories downloaded, similar to Catherine. The fact that this reveal is so early in the game changes the story in several ways. All the information up to this point, from before your brain scan, has been rendered useless. Your troubled situation, your headache, your accident, even all the characters that were mentioned before, none of it matters anymore. It turns out that humanity is finished and your memories are from hundreds of years ago, and they don't matter anymore. So what's the aim of the game? Why keep playing? A survival horror game has become a treacherous adventure, and only you can decide what that adventure means. Simon and Catherine have several conversations and reflections throughout the game about the philosophical implications of this new cyber world and of their own existence as data. The horror themes have now combined traditional horror elements with psychological horror themes and a suspense that stems from the new information you find from different areas of this dystopian underwater world, where the entire world is now submerged. Some new alien life form has taken over corpses and machines and aims to join all machines and life together. Lore-wise, I really like how the scare element works. In this case, the enemies have an EMP effect that can erase your data, and since you're just a machine and your mind is just data, you can feel the distortion effect as enemies come closer. It works the same as a fear system in other horror games, including Amnesia from the same developer, where you get dizzy from fear. But just the implication that there's a literal reason for the visual effect and the game over result makes this an innovative way to use some old horror tropes. Simon and Catherine talk about an arc that holds the mental data of all the remaining humans before their assumed death, and that this arc needs to be launched into space where it can orbit the sun and survive via solar power. It's an ethical discussion about what being alive means and how people can choose to survive by any means. Simon questions the worth of keeping data alive when it doesn't make any real difference. Humanity is dead. What difference does it make if a copy of their data floats around in space? But Catherine argues that the people who made the Ark alongside her had high hopes for a way to salvage what remains of humanity, even if it's just as data and as ones and zeros. And she wants to leave her hopes of the future with the data in the Ark. With this very original idea, Soma has the player moving forward to achieve something that only has value if they believe so. Usually, when we play a horror game, we're trying to survive enemies and escape the dangerous area that we're trapped in. But in Soma, we drive forward into all kinds of terrifying areas and work hard to accomplish tasks set by ourselves, rather than just staying alive by whatever means. I wasn't just scared in this game, I was worried about what will happen if I fail here, about what kind of future I can create if I'm successful. It's the most unusual experience I've ever had playing a horror game. At the same time, the enemies and the settings create suspense and fear that rivals the greatest horror games at times. While other times, it's the mere idea that you need the courage to go to an area that you know has monsters, and that nothing is forcing you to go. You want to go to these dangerous areas to finish your task. There is no escape. Whether you stand still or reach some new empty area, it makes no difference. But we move forward, learning more about the causes of the disaster that killed the remaining humans, what the alien life form is, and what it truly means to exist as data, especially when data can be copied. The ending is one of the most brilliant finales I've ever experienced in media. Soma uses the cyber world and meta ideas in a better way than any game or show out there. By the end of the game, you've had several moral dilemmas, such as leaving yourself behind. After copying your data to move to another body, you find that the old data still exists as usual. So what differentiates the real you? What if your current self ended up being the one that was left behind? This same question comes up in the ending. As you rush to upload yours and Catherine's data into the Ark, the upload barely finishes before the Ark is launched into space. But you're still here. Once again, you only copied your data. So here you are, trapped in this lonely world, while some copy of you made it into the virtual utopia in the Ark. It's even sadder when Simon and Catherine's heated discussion about the sad truth leads Catherine to overload while she argues and shut off permanently, leaving Simon truly alone. But soon after, we see our character wake up under the sun once more, and a few feet ahead, we meet Catherine in the flesh. We made it. We're on the Ark. But as a player, have you succeeded or failed? That's a moral dilemma that only you can answer after all you've experienced throughout the game. Do you embody both copies of yourself? Does only one side matter? Can you just choose to believe that you're the one that succeeded instead of the one that failed? Soma doesn't just use the idea of horror, it allows the player to create the horror for themselves. The philosophical implications and the setting of the game serve as a scare, but also as a goal for the player. We decide what we want to accomplish, even if it's a linear story. Whether we were right or wrong, and what pushes us through the horrors is up to our own interpretation. Ultimately, the scariest moments are made scarier by our understanding of the truth and the situation that we're in. I appreciate how Soma went the extra mile in changing up the horror formula while adding some new elements to make the game feel high quality and fresh. There's few games that enrich the existing format the way Soma did, and in a game where the setting and feeling should have been everything, the story and exploration found a way to shine as well. I hope more games can take Soma as inspiration and complement their strengths by improving the elements that aren't expected to shine. But let me know what your thoughts are regarding Soma, and leave a comment about what games you want to hear about more in the future. Until then, I hope I see you in the next video.